Good evening. I'm sitting here in Sydney, Australia right now for another couple of days, recharging my batteries and getting ready to go back to work in the real world in LA. Let's say I don't think, no, can't say much. It's pretty dead out here. We're out by the airport in Sydney. But it was an emotional time, and it's been emotional for a lot of different things going on in the world. Um, for me, it was a special time this week because of the 9/11 anniversary, um, or memorial, probably be a better way for it. I am from the East Coast. I'd been there a lot, and my partner was from the East Coast. My mother-in-law was concerned back in New Jersey. Her name is Muff. That she thought she lost her financial advisor and a friend in it. And I did know from West Hollywood we lost a couple, gay couple that had a child who was, I think the kid was about 8 or 9, maybe 10, and they were confirmed dead. And it was still, there was a lot of unknowns because it was weeks and weeks of debris there. The debris was still smoldering. So I flew back, and Muff and I went into the city, and we parked, and I talked to a police officer. And I said to him, I said, I'm really sorry for you having lost your peers and colleagues and team members. And I said, I've been training people at the Sheriff Academy for years here, and go out on patrol as a volunteer and do things like that. And I said, I understand. And he was very cool, and he was certainly emotionally attached to what was going on. And he said, come on. He gave us a little bit of a private tour, a little access to some things. And it still brings me shivers, as I think about it. And we all walked in silence that day for about 3 hours. And I say we all. It was my mother-in-law, myself, and many, many, many others walking. As I said, this was before it became a tourist trap with people with T-shirts and little plaques and things like that. No, this was just people who'd lost somebody, people who couldn't believe this happened. A lot of tears, and we just walked in silence. It was so, we were bonding, okay? It was horrible because there was this horrible stench in the air that you could smell. And it was, if you've ever been around a crematorium, it was that horrible smell you get there. And there were just layers of gray dust covering things everywhere. And there were a lot of stores that their windows had been blown out by the explosion. And things were still the way they were 2 weeks or 3 weeks before when it all happened. We went by a shoe store that was kind of bizarre because it was a women's shoe store. As I say, there were probably hundreds and hundreds of us walking around. And here's this shoe store, and everything is still there the way it was. Nobody was ripping things off and grabbing and running. There was just this whole store stuck in my mind because it was still in the display mode. The women's shoes were up there on the racks and whatever, and on the tables, but they were covered with gray debris, which was partly the papers that had been blown out of the building, partly the blocks and walls that had been blown out, and partly the bodies. That's why it smelled everywhere. The glass was gone, but all the items were still standing there. It was very sobering, and it was extremely mortality reminding. And great, and I was so grateful not to be part of that dust, and many of us were, and we walked around and just, oh my God, it was rough. So, I talk about mortality in the groups a lot that I do, reminding people to stop and smell the flowers, take a minute to say hello to somebody, to look around and see what's around you. Yeah, and my friend that I was sharing this with, who's a media person in the news, she came back too, and she said, yeah, She said, I'm grateful for the life I've been gifted for these past 22 years. You know, um, the memories, are just vivid. And man, I was so deeply affected by it, as were people there. We witnessed events, scenes. It was just so sad. And I appreciate you all. And I hope and remind you over and over, please, please, people, take the time to look around, to sense what's going on, to listen to the music, to watch the flowers, to watch the people. Take the time to enjoy today. They say life, I don't care where you're going, whether you're going to heaven or hell later, but take time on this journey that you're on to really appreciate things. Please. Thanks.